Hello friends, it's Lisa and I'm back with another video today. This is the first time I think I'm sharing a Bible journaling that I've done, but I've gotten pretty good at this one technique, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. I've been Bible journaling for about a year. So the first thing I do is I typically draw out what I'm going to be Bible journaling. And obviously, you don't have to be a drawer. As you can tell, I'm okay at drawing. I'm drawing sticks here, so it was a little bit easier. And I do cheat here in a minute. You'll see that. But if, just so you know, if you want this art for your own Bible journaling, head over to my blog because I have the one I did, because I use an Interleaf Bible, so I use a full page. But if you have just a regular Bible journaling Bible, I also included a mini size version of it that you can use in your Bible if you just have, the margins. So anyway, here I'm using Procreate on my iPad, which is why you can see all of this. I think this is just such a fun part of Procreate, is that you can watch the whole thing come together. So I use a lot of different layers and work on my art that way. Then I can move things around, and then at the end, and there you just saw me cheat, I outlined that flower. Then at the end you can then I outline it with black once I've gotten all the layers where I want them. So here I'm outlining in black. I do change one of the buds on the staff to what are they called? Almond, because is supposed to be full of almonds and stuff. And the flowers aren't almond buds, so you can always change that to be more like the actual story. Here I wanted to show you what I'm doing. Now I cut this video down as short as I could make it, and it's still 30 minutes. So I did want to show you this. I'm using a Sharpie pen to outline all of the We Blossom Where God Plants Us and the staves. And I do that very slowly. That was at double time, so you can tell I'm going slowly, and I didn't film the whole thing because it's kind of boring and takes a long time. But all you need to do is just cut the paper out and put it behind your other paper. A lot of times you can do this with a light box, but since it's in a Bible, you can't really do that. But the pages are so thin in Bibles, because it's such a long book, that you can see right through it with no problem. Next, I'm taking some Distressed Collage Medium Matte and painting over. It's really critical that you make sure you use like a Sharpie or something, a waterproof pen, and give it a little bit of time to dry, because even sometimes waterproof pens will smudge a little bit if they're not fully dry. And I just paint a thin layer of that collage medium over the entire thing. And I painted it on both sides of that page. So I painted it on the drawing side as well as the text side, just because I thought I'd go over the text. I don't like to smudge out the text where you can't read it, but I do think it's fun. You'll see I add a little flower on there. So the next thing I'm doing is kind of creating an underpainting. And what that is when you want a tone over the entire image, a lot of times you'll put a base layer of something. And when you're working with acrylics or something like that, it doesn't really matter because everything's so opaque. But with these Pitt pens, you're able to kind of build up layers like you would in watercolor. The Pitt pens, you can move them around. See, I'm smudging them with my finger on top of this plastic coating that I've done with the collage medium. I can smudge it when it's wet, but then when it's dry, it's permanent. So even when I color over it with other colors, it's not going to mix or anything like that. So that's what's really cool about these markers. I don't know of any other markers that do this. Basically, it's the India ink formulation that allows you to do it. You can color over the collage medium with alcohol markers, but a lot of times those are expensive. You don't want to ruin them because there can be some texture, as well as they don't layer. They'll just push each other away if you color over something that's already been colored. Now you'll see here on the top left of that page that you can kind of see where it's darker. That's because I didn't get full coverage of the collage medium. Sorry, brain fart. Of the collage medium. So you just want to be careful that you get the full thing, the full coverage. Although it does add some texture and vibrancy to the painting or drawing, coloring, whatever. Now I'm just coloring with my lighter brown pens. Oh, right here I'm taking some ink pads and I stacked 2 on top of each other and put 2 stacks of 2 under there just to make it so it's the same height as the other side. This is pretty early on in the Bible where this story happens, so all of the Israelites have just left Egypt. God got them out and they're in the desert, and some of the leaders of the other tribes are like, yo, we should be, priests, not this Aaron dude, it's us, right? And Moses is like, God, what should I do? And God's like, well, have everybody bring a staff into the Holy of Holies, and I'll make my decision on who should be a priest. They come in the next morning, and Aaron's staff has bloomed. So that's kind of where we are in the Bible. So I really loved this story and I couldn't figure out why. So I'm listening through the whole Bible right now, and this story just stuck with me, which is kind of interesting because it's in Numbers, and Numbers is a bunch of different laws, and then there'll be a story about how people failed at those laws, and then there's a bunch more laws, and then a story. Anyway, so this was one of those stories, and it just stuck with me. And then I was at church, and they were preaching on something totally different, and it just hit me, right? Like, we blossom where God plants us. God has a specific place for us. It wasn't that he didn't love those other people, who wanted to be priests. That's just not what God made them to do, right? So that's where this idea came from. Now, I have just colored all these stabs different colors. I colored the Aaron one in the lightest color because I'd left the staff uncolored. If you remember when I did that underpainting, I colored around the main staff, and then the rest of them I colored over, which the reason I did that is I wanted the Aaron staff to kind of look more illuminated, and when you color over the blue, it dulls it out a little bit, which is what I was going for on the other staffs. Next, I'm taking my mid-tone color. So like other colors, like other coloring methods, I like to use 3 colors to get, some dimension. So that's what I'm doing. I'm dragging the marker down the side, and then I'm pulling it out with my finger just to get a smooth blend. And you have to be careful when you're working in these small areas. Now, if you want to do the same thing and you want to color in a different method, then feel free to take the image off my blog and use it and make anything you want. Although share what you do with me, because I'd absolutely love to see it. But if you do want to use this method, I think it's a really fun way. And if the ink is still wet and you mess up, you can just wet your finger a little bit and wipe it off, or wet your towel and wipe it off. I've done that plenty of times. So it's kind of a really nice way to color, and you don't mess up quite as much. Next, I'm going to take the darkest color I'm using, and I'm just adding a line of this. I smudge it out just a tiny bit in some places, but really I tend to just leave the darkest color in a line because I'm really trying to create contrast here. And contrast can be scary. I know, I find contrast to be really hard to do. I like bright colors, but contrast is really good because it helps those bright colors pop. For each of the staffs, you'll see I used a different, I like to use multiple different bottom colors, and I don't use the same color scheme for any two staffs. So the mid-tone, like the light tone and the mid-tone and the dark tone, are different variations for each. I only used 6 or 8 different markers, but I used different groups of 3 for each staff to make them all look different, which I guess they all look different because they're all very different looking, but that's also something I wanted. Kind of like the staffs represent each of us, right? And we're all different and we're all made for a different purpose. So like I included the shepherd's crook there, kind of as a Judah kind of thing, right? Where Daniel was a shepherd and Jesus is our shepherd and stuff like that. So that's where this came. You can use the same technique on cards. I made a really cool card. I will link that at the end because it turned out so cool. I used that technique here. I just use a very thin layer of the collage medium. So here we go. You can see I picked on the staffs on the right, I darken the right side. On the staffs on the left, I darken the left side of the staff. And I do that because I want it to look like, I want it to look like the light is shining on Aaron's staff and diffusing out from there, which also helps with that blue underpainting. So here I've sped ahead a little bit and I am adding some darker colors to this round staff. You just have to follow the contours of the staff to make it look cylindrical, three-dimensional. So that's an important aspect of this. Kind of follow where the shadows. I found in art in general, but especially in drawing or painting, when you're trying to do make something look like something, right? Instead of just abstract, that the best way to get a good picture is to spend time imagining it in your head. Imagine what you want it to look like, and then you're able to create that on a piece of paper, right? So if you don't have a good picture in your head, then you can't put the picture onto paper. That's why a lot of people use reference photos, which I totally would recommend. If you're drawing something or painting something and you're not sure, if you look at it, then the picture's in your head, right? So then you can put it back down on another piece of paper. In reference photos, it doesn't have to be exactly what you're wanting to draw. Like, it could be a flower, but you want it a different way, or you want multiple flowers. But looking at that one flower in a reference photo will really help you. Next, I'm taking some greens, and I'm coloring over the shoot part of the staff, right? So where it is budded out and is now growing. I wanted that to have some green to kind of vitality, like it is growing, right? I think probably the staff looked more like a tree where it like had branches and stuff, but I wanted to show all the other staffs. And you see the two on the ground, I kind of wanted it to be like, some of them couldn't even take God's glory, right? They just kind of fell over. Next, I'm taking some pinks. I thought this would be a really good contrast and something very vibrant against the browns. So it's going to be brown staves, and then it's going to be tan brown floor because they're in the desert, right? This is in a tent. The ground is going to be sand. And then I did put purple walls, tent linings. I'm not sure what they're exactly called, but purple in the background. So you want to keep the number of colors low. If you have too many colors, it doesn't look harmonious and your eye gets kind of crazy. So that's why I used a dark purple in the background, because it harkens to the flowers, but it doesn't detract from the flowers. Next, I'm following the lines of the flowers and adding this mid-tone pink color. And I am pulling it out a little bit because I don't want it to look just very liney, but at the edge, it is liney because I wanted that to look like veins in the flower. Now, I couldn't figure out what color I wanted at the bottom, and in a little bit I add some purple to that, so you'll see that. Next, I wanted the ground around Aaron's staff to kind of look like it had some grass there. It was growing too. So that's what I'm going to do. And you'll see I start by just adding some color and then wiping it away. And I'm not wiping it fully away, I'm just wiping it a little bit away. And that adds the base, right? I'm building color on top. So because these are translucent when you're using them on top of the collage medium, building the color adds a lot of dimension. You can see how those staves went from very flat to now they look a lot almost like they're real staves. I mean, I'm not a super amazing artist, but they do look cylindrical, and you know what I'm trying to draw here. You know what I'm saying? Like, they look like real things. And that's why the way that you get that look is by building up layers. Next, I'm taking some tan, and then I put a little bit of the darker color on top, and I just scribble it over, and then I use my finger and kind of mish them around. Not so much that they're just one color, but just enough that it looks like sand. So since it's kind of yellow, it does get a slight greenish hint over the blue, but not so much that it bothered me. So I do use a piece of paper to kind of keep me from coloring on other pages, and you want to work in small enough sections that it won't dry before you finish what you're working on. So just practicing that a little bit is helpful. Next, I'm adding some shadows. Because the light is coming from in front of the staff, the shadows are going to be cast out behind the staff. And if you remember earlier in the video, I was talking about the shadows on the staffs. The shadows on the ground are going to be similar, where they're radiating outward, away from Aaron's staff. You want to pick a direction for the light and have all of your shadows follow in that way. That'll make everything look more realistic. If the shadows were going the exact opposite ways from where they were, you'd be really confused. Or your brain would be. You'd be like, that doesn't look right. So you just have to think through it a little bit. Next, I'm adding some shadows around the fallen staffs because they still would have some shadows. It'd be very light. They wouldn't have a lot. You wouldn't see a lot, but they do have shadows. And they even have a little bit of shadow on the ground in front of them. So you'll see that I add that in just a second. I do want to flick out the shadows because shadows aren't just, flat. Light spreads and knocks off other things, so shadows look kind of hazy. They're not exact outlines. It's not like the cartoons where shadows are just the exact image, on the floor. So you want to think about that as you're adding them. And I'm just feathering them out with my finger. Your finger is your best tool. And the great thing about these Pitt pens is you can just use a little bit of water and then wipe it off on your microfiber tool and you don't have any problems. You may get some color buildup, but once you wipe it off on the microfiber towel, it's not going to transfer colors. You may have to wash your hands with soap to get all of the color off, but it's not going to transfer onto your work. You'll see here I haven't colored below that where God plants us yet, but I will, and I'll just do the same thing I did for the rest of the ground. I thought about having kind of the outline of the Ark of the Covenant with whatever is opposite of a shadow, like a radiance, kind of coming out, but I felt like there was a lot going on already, so I didn't include that, but it's definitely something you could include. Next, I'm taking some purple and adding it as the third color to these flowers. I couldn't figure out what color I should add, so I decided then to add purple and then to add purple as the tent coverings as well. So that's kind of how that came together. I really wanted something other than the blue to be the background, but I also wanted something that would make the brown pop off the page. So I went with this dark purple, and you'll see here I'm just creating an opening because I wanted it to look like the tent was opening or had been opened. So I'm just creating that line up there, and I do want this line harsh, right? I want it to look like the tent stops, rather than the tent fades into the sky. So I'm leaving that line hard, but I will kind of smooth out within the tent lining. So you'll see that in just a second here. You just want to create that opening, and now I'll have an inside and an outside. You will see that those black lines that we created at the very beginning of this video are still showing up really firmly. I didn't need to go back and redraw in all the black lines. Since these markers are translucent when you use them this way, you definitely don't need to worry about spending that time a second time, or in my case now that would have been a third time drawing this picture. So my plan is also to print this out on some Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock and to color it in with my alcohol markers. I think that would be really pretty. Now here you can see I've just been coloring that in, and I'm just real methodical about it, but I don't want those harsh lines. So I'll use my finger here in just a minute to smooth everything out, so then it looks like a wash of color rather than a marker dragging along the page. But it's still wet when I do this. Even if you let it dry at this stage, you could add some of that purple back on there and then smush it around with your finger, and it would start to hide those lines. It's just easier to do when you do it while the marker's still wet. One other important thing is if you wanted the background, this purple, to be more purple, right? To look, to be deeper in that richer color, then you could color it over again. Now I'm coloring the other side, and I just wanted to show you this real quick. I put my microfiber cloth sometimes down because I don't want to smudge things that are still slightly wet with the side of my hand. But I can't really color and have my hand up, not touching, so I just pull in my microfiber towel and it works perfectly. Next, see here is where I'm just kind of mixing it together so it looks like a whole picture. That is about done with the left side. I do go back in, and I think I show you this, where I put some I'm putting some basically folds in this, but I decide not to. I thought about putting some folds, but I didn't want the background to be the center of this picture. Instead, I decided to carry those shadows up, because when you'll see when they're going on the ground, they're going one way, and then they hit that wall and they start going straight up. So that's a helpful thing. If you're unsure of what your shadow should look like, just you can try it out in your house, right? Like put a stick, or I could put like my vacuum cleaner in front of a wall and see where that shadow would be. So I just added those on the purple and left that as is. I can always go back and add more detail later if I feel like it, but I think I'm pretty happy with where it turned out. Next I'm just freehanding a similar flower to the one that's on the staff on the other page over here. And you'll see I just drew it in real quick and dragged my finger so the lines weren't too harsh or anything. And now on the inside of the flower, I'll color that with a light pink, like purpley pink. And then on the outside, I'm doing some of the same colors that I did for the underpainting / outside on the other side of the flower. So the flower is actually encasing kind of the story of Aaron's staff budding, and the rest of it just is blue. So I like coloring like this on top of the Bible, but I personally I wouldn't do this with any kind of acrylic paint where you couldn't then still read the words, but that's just me. I know that some people do cover up everything except for the one verse or whatever that they're Bible journaling about, which whatever works for you. Sandy Allnuck has a great book with a workbook out. I actually am part of I helped her start the Facebook group on Facebook, obviously, called Bible Journaling Made Simple. So if you're interested and you like doing Bible journaling, please come over and join us. If not, then I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can totally use this same technique a lot of different ways. Have a wonderful day. I have had a great time spending time with you guys. Feel free to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more like this or other types of videos. Here's some videos you may like, Have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.